America. I am Osei-Frimpong. I'm also, you might know me as The Funky Academic. I have a website, www.thefunkyacademic.com. Now, you might be wondering why I'm here. Yvette is taking care of some business right now in Atlanta, so I am hosting tonight's show, and this is where you're going to get your black politics for tonight. And we have a packed show because we're going to be talking about R. Kelly. We're going to be talking about entrepreneurship, and we're going to be talking about power. Now, if you think I'm talking about Power, the television show, you don't know me very well. I'm talking about powers and political power and how power is gained, lost, wielded, consolidated, and shared. And it has to be all of those things. And so I'm going to give you a very clear account about how power is shared and wielded and consolidated and what we can do. Because at the end, all of this is a political education with the aim of lifting our community. I want black people in the middle class. I want black people living around other black people who all have, the goal is, like, and Yvette and I talk about this often, the goal is for you to have $300K in your bank account and stock portfolio and to be living around all other people, many of them are black, who also have $300K in your portfolio. That's the goal. That's what freedom looks like, because that way you can go to your friend's house and you don't have to worry about them stealing things. And your cousins can hang out with you and you don't have to worry about them hitting you up for anything. That's what freedom looks like. Freedom isn't you being a millionaire, or as Jay-Z would like to think of himself, a billionaire, and only having one other Negro, the second billionaire, to hang out with. That's not freedom. That's loneliness. That's alienation. And also, if you're that one billionaire and you're around sharks who also happen to be like, sharks with a lot of money, that's still you around sharks. That's not freedom. You can't relax. You can't relax. If you are a billionaire but you're married to someone who's a gold digger, that's not freedom. You can't relax because that person's going to poison you. Because in these United States, we don't order autopsies in all cases. So, freedom is being around other people who are also free, and that way you can be free with each other. You can have honest conversations about things and know that nobody else is, telling you a story because they want something that you have. So freedom isn't being rich around people who either are out to get your money or don't have any money themselves because there's an old saying about how you got to be careful around people who don't have a job, not because they're bad people, but because they're going to steal. And that's not a bad, that's just because they're hungry. So freedom is being around people who are your people and they like you, but they also have enough that they don't have to covet what you have. So that's what freedom is. And until we figure that out, we'll have a lot of people who strive to get out of their community just to be around people who alienate them. And they won't have any friends. So freedom isn't being rich without any friends. Freedom is being rich with all of your people also, or having enough with all of your people also having enough. Then you could relax and be with each other and enjoy each other. So until we understand that, we're going to be confused about what the opposite of poverty or what the opposite of degradation is. But before I get to that, I want to welcome you to the show. I'm Vets in Atlanta today. I'm hosting. My name is Iremy. I'm also at thefunkyacademic.com. And today we're going to be talking about R. Kelly. We're going to be talking about entrepreneurship. And we're going to be talking about power. And I think you're going to learn things that you might not know about each of those categories. But first, I want to replay a video that we played on Wednesday's show of Fred Hampton talking to a group. Fred Hampton was chairman of the Black Panther Party in Chicago, and you might know him because he was assassinated in, I want to say 68. Someone in YouTube could correct me if that's the case. So Chairman Hampton was assassinated in 68. He was 21 years old. And more important than his assassination, I believe, were the words he said in life. Because those are the words that actually, I think put a target on his head, but actually give me life. So I want to thank Fred Hampton by replaying this clip. And now this clip is a clip of Fred Hampton having a meeting with another black group who wants to start, and they're running their charter by Fred Hampton. And what you're going to notice is that this other black group, they have a plan to build a co-op bank. But they don't have a political education. And then Fred Hampton's going to explain why if you don't have a political education, nothing else matters. Because if you don't have a political education, people are going to steal. Or people who aren't used to power are going to have power, and then they're not going to know how to consolidate, share power. They're going to know how to just like grab, because all they've been trying to do in their life is grab. So Fred Hampton's going to give I think a 3-minute disquisition on the importance of political education for any movement. And to be clear, anything that's going to move black people in America outside of our generational poverty is going to take a movement. So if you want serious black communities, not communities in collapse, but serious black communities where every single person in that community is making, middle-class wages, then it's going to take a revolution. And then Fred Hampton right now in this clip is going to tell you why you need education in your revolution, or an education program, in order to foment the political resolution black people need in order to be free. All right. Let me play this clip.
There's no educational program here?
That's come out of the social action thing. You set that up, bro. I mean, we can't put everything on one piece of paper.
What about this bank?
Credit union?
Mm-hmm.
Credit union. Credit union, my brother.
Is a bank.
Are you hip to credit unions? It is a bank.
Yeah, you go and borrow money?
Yeah, it's a bank. It's a bank. Owned by the people. Run for the people. And by the people.
Mm-hmm. What will money be given out to people for?
Well, the people would decide that. You want to buy, whatever, the people in the community decide. You need some living room furniture, maybe? You need a car, maybe?
See, the thing is with me, you dig, I need to know some more about it. I wish you had some more literature about the educational thing here. Because, you dig, as far as we're concerned in the struggle, the way we look at struggle is that this depends on the educational thing, you dig. Because
this depends on the education. Well, the whole thing.
No, but in the end, this does. You can form this with no education. You can form this.
No, not the way we're talking about forming it. Right. We're talking about forming it right. It's not on the paper. We didn't write it on the paper.
You can form it right with no education.
No.
Let me give you an example. Jomo Kenyatta formed the excellent revolution with no education. And on the end thing, Jomo told the motherfucker, said, well, you can educate hate the enemy, but I'm your brother. I'll help you lead the revolution. Now I'm more pressure. Another example, Papa Doc in Haiti. Papa Doc in Haiti hated everything white. Man, you couldn't put this white paper in front of Papa Doc's face. But he moved all the white people out and he took over and be oppressed. He did, because of no education. And the people that had been educated, they just said that we don't hate the motherfucking white people, we hate the oppressor, whether he be white, black, brown, or yellow. So we got to know the educational program to find out what it's going to be in the finale. A lot of people, Jomo Kenyatta is called never a revolutionary, but an ex-revolutionary. So is Papa Doc. They brought on a successful revolution. That thing in the Mao's was a bitch. Bantu freedom fighters, all that kind of action. But what we're saying is that it's the end. That you don't judge Castro now. You can't do it. Nobody in this room could judge whether Castro's going to be a revolutionary or not. You know what I mean? We're talking about things, you know what I mean, with China, the People's Republic, and even at the stage they're in now, talking about even going on further into a communistic state. That's what we're talking about. Those are revolutionary. So we got to understand here the educational program that you have to be able to figure out whether it will go on the right lines, where the people will end up in a situation where they can be able to really control themselves. You understand what I'm saying? With no education, the people that take this local foundation and start stealing money because they won't be really educated to why it's a people's thing anyway. You understand what I'm saying? With no education, you have neo-colonialism instead of colonialism, like you got in Africa now, like you got in Haiti. So what we're talking about is there has to be educational program. That's very important. As a matter of fact, it's so important for us that a person has to go through 6 weeks of our political education before he can consider himself a member of the party, able to even run down ideology for the party. Why? Because if they don't have an education, then they're nowhere. You dig what I'm saying? They're nowhere because they don't even know why they're doing what they're doing. You might get people caught up in the emotionalist movement. You understand me? You might get them caught up in because they're poor and they want something. And then if they're not educated, they want more. And before you know it, they'll be capitalists. And before you know it, we have Negro imperialists. There's no educational program.
So if you paid attention there, you said, look, Fred Hampton's like, great. If you have a, first of all, let's give it up for Fred Hampton, Chairman Fred Hampton. That was an incredible video. That was an incredible disquisition by a very learned man at the young age of 21. He'd been organizing since he was 15, 16. And I'm going to tell you the importance of learning how to wield, consolidate, and share power as this video goes on. But that's him not wielding power for himself. He doesn't talk for himself. He wields power so that he can create a movement and the community he wants to live in. That was Fred Hampton giving an education. And hopefully that was an education that, 50 years later, we're going to work through together in Breaking Brown. And I'll put up the number soon and we'll talk through it. But think about the point. He's like, look, you can have this bank. This bank is great. The people will decide what they want to do with it. But if they don't have the political education, he's not worried that the people are going to be financially illiterate and squander the money. And he's not worried that people won't have the technical education and won't know how to work the computers or whatever. He's worried that they won't have the political education, so that they're going to steal the money. They're going to forget that this is a community bank and just use it for their own coffers. That's what a political education will give you. It'll give you a grounding in why you're doing isn't necessarily for your vulgar, superficial interests, but that your interests lie in strengthening the community. Right? A political education will tell you that freedom is not just one billionaire or two billionaires, but a community of everyone doing fine. Without that political education, you'll just be, like you said, without that political education. If you give a poor person, if a poor person joins the movement because they want something, when they get what they want, they're just going to want more because all they know is how to want stuff. They're just going to want more. There's not going to be a boundary. And then pretty soon you'll have a black capitalist. And then we said pretty soon you'll have a Negro imperialist. And that's what we've done. That's the danger. Or in Obama's case, we created and we supported, a Negro neoliberal. We didn't care that his policies shut down our schools. We supported him because we didn't have the political education to, one, recognize that that's who he was. And two, we didn't have the political education to ask for more than symbolism. We didn't have the political education to ask for clean water. We didn't have the political education to hold him accountable for the time we had him. We were caught in the emotion of the movement. And that's exactly what Fred Hampton warned us against. We were caught in the emotion of the movement. And we didn't get the policies we deserved. And you know what? I hope the symbol and the emotion will, buy your kids a house or pay for your student debt, because what we should have been asking for is policy from our first black president, whom we gave 95% of our vote to. I didn't vote for him, but that's neither here nor there. But that was a lack of our political education. And that will not happen again because, I'm trying to do my part to make sure that doesn't happen again through the political education we give here at Breaking Brown every Monday and Wednesday, and tomorrow, Tuesday, at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And if you like what we're doing, you can go over to thefunkyacademic.com, sign up for a monthly membership. Honestly, this takes time. This takes money too, like the equipment. And we're kind of trying to expand. I'm getting a lead on a space to create a Breaking Brown studio that's not in my place, but that is in a community center in the middle of Black Athens, so that we can have a live studio audience full of our people. So I want, if this grows well, and honestly, if enough of you guys go over to thefunkyacademic.com and sign up for a monthly membership, we're going to have a studio where Yvette's going to be doing this show at least on Wednesday nights in front of a studio audience. So we'll take a few questions from the studio audience, just regular working people. And then we'll take calls and we'll grow our political education. And we're going to do both local politics and national politics, kind of like in front of a studio audience. So that's what this looks like if it grows. And that's the kind of political education we're trying to build towards in this show, Breaking Brown. But notice what Fred Hampton said. If you don't give the political education, it doesn't matter how much money you give them. They're just going to want more, and then they're going to use that money to become oppressors. And that's where we segue into R. Kelly. All right, so R. Kelly's a first generation. I think R. Kelly's a symptom. I think he's a sleazebag, but I also think he's a symptom. I think he's a first generation guy with money, and then if you give people if without a political education, and if you give people who have never had power, the first thing they're going to do is abuse it. If you put a kid in the room with too many desserts, the kid is going to eat without the education about what this sugar does to your body and how all these bad things can happen. The kid's going to eat too much and actually make themselves sick. So there's no reason to believe that people without a political education will wield power responsibly and respectfully, and will wield it with an eye towards justice for the community. And will wield it with an eye towards real freedom. So we find out R. Kelly is running a cult where he tells young girls, because R. Kelly's got a thing for young girls, and he likes them real young. So he's got these houses. He's got real estate because he has money. So he's got these houses where he has young girls. By the way, the article I'm talking about originated in BuzzFeed, but it's now blown out. It's actually a very well-resourced article in BuzzFeed. So if you just go to Google and put in R. Kelly and BuzzFeed and cult, you'll find the article. So he's got a situation where he stashes these women in houses across these United States, telling them they're going to be pop stars. And what he does is he has a very strict rules about how they're supposed to treat him and how he likes his sex. And they think that they're going to be pop stars, but really they're just people in a cult. And this is a situation where, as Professor Edward Wolf has found out, the median black family has $1,700 net worth. So you have all of these generationally poor people, $1,700 net worth. And there was a video where Antonio Moore said in LA, pretty much black people are locked into 13 occupations. So that's $1,700 net worth, and you're locked into 13 occupations. And then and you don't want any of those 13 occupations because they might not be very attractive. And a lot of those occupations we're locked into are low-paying occupations. So you're young, and the only other way you see success is either these 13 occupations that are in your community, most of them which are paying poverty wages, or you look on TV and you see stars, you see VH1, you see people in the television show Power or the television show Empire. You see rap stars, you see all of these I don't want to say garbage professions. They might not be the worst professions, but they're not very good people in them. And you see maybe that's my aspiration. So I'll go have sex with R. Kelly for as long as that takes, and he'll make me a star because I don't know how to get from here to there, from here to pop star. And I definitely don't want the occupations I see, my parents doing. And honestly, a lot of our parents' jobs are getting outsourced. So it's the rational decision to go shack up with R. Kelly. And then R. Kelly, who doesn't know how to wield power with an eye towards justice, now has just a ton of power and is going to use it to fulfill his most vulgar interests. He's gonna this isn't. This is a profound lack of education, and none of it's about a technical education, and none of it's financial literacy. This is a profound lack of political education that shunts the most vulnerable people into the most vulnerable quasi-solutions. And so we're going to go a little bit deeper into that, and we're going to use Fred Hampton, but we're also going to use this woman, Hannah Arendt. Hannah Arendt wrote this book on revolution. It came out in 1963. And remember, this book came out in 1963. I'd put it up behind me, but like I don't have a producer here. So imagine like, name of the book is On Revolution. It's by Hannah Arendt. It's a pretty good book. It's a comparative study on the French Revolution and the American Revolution. And in it, she makes the claim that the French Revolution failed because it was driven by people who are hungry. It was driven by like the biological necessity to eat. And when you're when you have a revolution that's driven by biological necessity, there is no natural end. So the French Revolution ended, and then it just kind of kept going, and it started the reign of terror, because just like Fred Hampton said, poor people, if they join the revolution because they want something, as soon as they get it, they want more. So that's what happened with the bloodshed of the French Revolution. It went, and then once it was over and they dethroned the king, they just kept killing people. It was a reign of terror because they got the bloodlust without the political education. And she says the American revolution succeeded because they formed a stable government after the revolution, because the revolutionaries weren't hungry. They outsourced their necessary labor onto like slaves and all that stuff, who weren't necessarily revolutionaries, because like, if you're a slave, you don't care about whether your master is King George or the Americans, or like some white colonialist. So the revolutionaries in the American case, according to Arendt, the revolutionaries in the American case were landed gentry, so they weren't driven by hunger, whereas the revolutionaries in the French case were driven by like biological necessity. And if you're driven by biological necessity, the opposite of your oppression isn't freedom. The opposite of your oppression is abundance, right? And we're going to talk about how important that is in a second, right? So for the Americans, the opposite of their oppression was freedom. For the French, the opposite of their oppression was abundance. And if the opposite of your oppression is abundance, you're not going to look. You're going to look. The opposite of your oppression is not going to be, a stable middle class, around middle class people, freely exchanging your opinions and ideas in a public sphere. It's going to look like bling. It's going to look like Jay-Z talking about $1 billion. It's going to look like cribs. It's going to look like abundance. And you're going to confuse that abundance with freedom because you don't know anything but want. And the opposite of want is abundance. If you actually had a more, nuanced appreciation for what freedom looks like in our life, and you weren't driven by biological want, then the opposite of your oppression would be like freedom. So this is going to go down to the more desperate the American situation comes for Black Americans, the more distorted the opposite of our oppression is going to look like. The more abundance, but not freedom, abundance is going to look like the opposite of our oppression. So that's where we get to Jay-Z. That's where we get to Jay-Z. That's where we get to R. Kelly. And that's where we get to the notion that is the life we want, when that's not the life you want. That's not the life you want. Because Jay-Z has to worry about people with their hand in his pocket. R. Kelly has to worry about... Do you think R. Kelly, if he's smart, he doesn't eat any of the food those women cook around. Like, R. Kelly can't get married because his wife will kill him. She will poison him. That's not freedom. Freedom is being around people who aren't in want and who are still committed to you so that you can be who you are and not have to worry about a food taster. I guess this is on my mind because I saw Game of Thrones last night. And, well, that happened. But freedom is being able to trust your friends won't steal from you. Freedom is being able to trust that you can help people without it being like a relationship of absolute dependence where they're desperate. That's freedom. So you want to be good. You don't need to be rich. You just need to be good. But you want everybody else to be good around you so you can do things for each other in a free way out of respect for each other. Not because you're scared of each other or you're defending yourselves against each other or you're plotting against each other. That's not freedom. So I hope you now know why the aspiration of a black politics is a black community, not a black individual. A black community, because only in a free community can black people be free. Only in a free community can black people be free. So, we talked about R. Kelly and how he's kind of a symptom of just what happens when you have power, but you don't have a political education, and you wield it to a vulnerable populace in an untoward way. And now people are saying, well, the girls who stay with him are free. They choose to stay with him. No, they're coerced by their circumstances. If you're looking at generational poverty all around you, and you have a job to either work for poverty wages for the rest of your life, because you don't the jobs that black people are being locked into at poverty wages, insofar as we can get a job, are lifetime jobs without upward mobility. So it's either have poverty wages for the rest of your life like the people around you, or shack up with R. Kelly. So you can say that's a free choice, but that's not what freedom looks like. And this is actually very clear in domestic abuse cases, because there's another book by Linda Hirschman called The Subject of Liberty, and she starts off with look, I wanted to write this book because in this, I started thinking about freedom when I was working at a domestic abuse shelter. And when I was working at a domestic abuse shelter, what they said was, some people would talk to me and say, well, these women are free. They choose to leave their husbands. And it's no. Actually, if the choice is between staying with an abusive husband, or they choose to go back to the husbands. But she was saying, no, if the choice is either go back to your abusive husband who only hits you sometimes, or leave. And if you don't know, the most dangerous time to leave an abusive partner is, the most dangerous time for an abusive partner is right before they're going to leave. Once the abusive partner finds out they're going to leave, that's when the real violence happens. So, or leave and then worry about that person tracking you down and finding you, or worry about that person harming your kids, then that's not really a choice. That's not really a freedom. It's a choice. You could either leave and forsake your kids and worry about for the rest of your life with your head over your back, or stay and kind of manage the situation and only get it sometimes. That's a choice, but it's not freedom, because none of those choices actually are reflective of your desires. So you're alienated from both choices, but other people are telling you that that's freedom. That's not freedom. That's just choices, garbage choices. So yes, we're talking about the situation of the women who take up with R. Kelly because they're looking at, generational poverty, that they're just going to reproduce if they go into either the joblessness or the same jobs that the people around them go into. And so that's not freedom. So saying that they choose to be there isn't being sensitive to the way that their circumstances are coercing them into a choice that's alienating. Their circumstances are coercing them into an alienating choice. And I hope that's clear. And I hope the goal of this is political education. So I hope you'll be able to explain this tomorrow morning to your friends and your family, and hope you type this on Facebook. By the way, tell your friends about this this cast. Watch it with your kids. Go ahead. I'll try to keep it clean. Watch it with your kids about this cast. Tell your friends. Share this on Facebook. Share this live. If you can find my page on Facebook, go ahead and share it from there, or tweet it around. You can just tweet. Or if you're on a listserv, go ahead and share this around. We try to do political education every Monday and Wednesday from 9 to about 10:30 on Friday, on Monday and Wednesday on YouTube. Usually on Breaking Brown's channel, Yvette Carnell. But today we're going to do it on my channel, The Funky Academic, or I am Osei-Frimpong, because Yvette is out of town. So now that we've dealt with, thought about dealing with R. Kelly and that horrible, horrible situation, that's the direct product of our circumstance. Because it's not like it's a Playboy Mansion and people just going there for a story. Oh, my years at the Playboy Mansion, it was so much fun, and then I left. No, these people are actually going there for a way out, a serious way out. This isn't a story that they're going to tell about some fun they had. This is I'm going to make my way out. I'm going to leave the ghetto because R. Kelly, or I'm going to leave my circumstances because R. Kelly says he can make me a star. So the difference between like Spring Break or like the Playboy Mansion and that kind of sexual coercion, and then like what R. Kelly is wielding, the power R. Kelly is wielding from like over these girls, is completely different. And it's more authoritarian. If you read the BuzzFeed article, he says about all of, like, they go into like the commands and R. Kelly's code of conduct about what it takes to be a Kelly girl and how, like I said, how he likes his sex and all that stuff. There's video, there's audio. It's really disturbing, but this is what happens when people get power who haven't been educated into wielding power with an eye towards justice, right? And this isn't just R. Kelly. This is a general problem with people who haven't wielded power, who haven't gotten an education in wielding power towards justice, but get power. Right now we have it, and this is an education, and Fred Hampton talked about how if it comes from poverty and you join the movement because of want, then you'll just want more once the movement's extinguished. If it comes from safety, it's the same thing. So we have a lot of, there's a lot of, people don't know. People don't know what drives mass incarceration. People think what drives mass incarceration is just the drug war. It's true. The drug war is a big, large aspect of mass incarceration. Another huge aspect of mass incarceration is the way we've criminalized sex offenses and thought about sex offenses in the last, since at least the 90s, since the Violence Against Women Act. It's gone up, I think, 60-fold. And that, I get the number from Marie Gottschalk's book, Caught. So, like I said, I don't have a producer here. So the name of the book is Caught, and it's about kind of the American fascination with criminalizing people, a lot of whom are black, and how, there's one part about how it's not just the drug war, but also sex offenses that's driven up criminalization. So we don't know how to talk about sex. We don't know how to wield power, and like we end up criminalizing a lot of behaviors that like could be dealt with other ways. And a lot of the sexual assault discourse comes from women, and honestly, a lot of those are who get it wrong are white women. They fashion laws thinking that they're going to get guys like Donald Trump, but then they vote Donald Trump in office, and those same laws end up putting a lot of like more vulnerable people in jail because they're misapplied by zealous prosecutors. So we need to look at that kind of wielding of power. And honestly, and this is important. If we talked about in Arendt, she deals with the French Revolution, and what drove them was hunger, and poverty. And so when they got the revolution, they just wanted more and more and more and more, and that led to the Reign of Terror. If what drives your politics is the fear of assault, then the opposite of the opposite of that fear isn't going to be freedom. The opposite of that fear is going to be security, right? And when the opposite of your what's driving your politics is a fear of assault and unmediated by a political education, and you grasp security, you're just going to grasp and grasp and grasp and grasp that security. And what it's going to look like is gated communities. It's going to look like segregated schools. It's going to look like segregated workplaces. It's going to look like segregated neighborhoods. It's also going to look like stop and frisk policies because you don't have a political education to go with your politics. So you're going to grasp security too much in a way that's not open to the regular vulnerabilities that we need as a free society. So your grasp for security is going to end up imposing state violence on vulnerable communities. It's going to end up starving often black communities of resources, and it's because you don't want to go to school with their kids because you think of them as a security risk. So if the opposite of your fears is going to be security as opposed to freedom, it's an immoderate concern. And so there's another book. I guess I talk a lot about books. I don't know. You deal with it. That's political education. I read books. I mean, my name's the Funky Academic. What do you want? So there's another book called Safe Space. I can't remember the author's name, but it's about actually how safe space rhetoric was used by the queer community, that's a gay and lesbian community, to criminalize the other urban community. And the other urban community was often blacks. So urban can mean both black and it can mean like gay and lesbian. So the LGBT, well, mostly the LG community used safe space rhetoric to criminalize black life. And that can account for why there actually aren't too many Negroes in San Francisco anymore, but also why, and these white lesbian and gay property owners ended up using the safe space rhetoric to criminalize transgender prostitutes and often LGBTQ youth of color. Because when you're a property owner, like that's what you do. You criminalize anyone you don't want in your community, out of your community. So that's how safe space rhetoric was co-opted to punish the most vulnerable populations. The more you know. So anytime someone talks about safe space, no, talk about brave space, because bravery is actually like a better way to couch these problems. We want brave space because we want to be able to interact with people who are a little bit dangerous, but who are our neighbors, right? We're supposed to love our neighbors. So we need brave spaces, not rash spaces, brave spaces, because bravery is, I'm sorry, I hit the microphone. Bravery is the middle between rashness and cowardice. So the right amount of moderation is bravery. Immoderation is cowardice on one hand and rashness on the other. So we want to cultivate brave spaces, not safe spaces, because safety is an immoderate desire. Excuse me. So I've talked about how if you confuse the opposite of poverty with abundance, you'll just want. You won't want freedom. You'll want a bling culture. I'll talk about how the opposite of like kind of bodily threat and predation is safety. So if your politics is driven primarily with first safety without a political education, you're going to end up just promoting policies that aren't particularly good for black life, because we are widely considered through propaganda to be safety risks. So like that's just going to be you're going to end up promoting an anti-black politics. So that's how, honestly, a lot of feminist politics, because it wasn't filtered through a racial political education, has yielded anti-black politics. And now we're going to go to the last thing before I talk about entrepreneurship: choice. Right? So this is, I'm sorry, I feel like I'm beating up on women, but like, you know, this is how it's shaken out, because these people are supposed to be our allies. Right? So choice politics doesn't work for black people, because if choice politics is what drives your political imagination, and you just want an abundance of choice, if you think freedom is an abundance of choice, that's not going to work for black people, because nobody chooses black people. Like there was a event mentioned last, or like was systematically chosen against, right? So was systematically picked around. Not that nobody chooses black people, but was systematically picked around. Event mentioned last week, this Texaco case in the 90s, where the treasurer, a guy named Robert Urlich, said like, you know what, we don't hire, he used the N-word, so I'll just say black people. We don't hire black people because, like, you know what, they're kind of like the black jelly beans. You pick around them and they just end up sticking to the bottom of the bag. We don't need them. Like, hiring black people is kind of a pain in the butt. You don't want them around, and like nobody chooses them. Nobody hires black people. So that was his argument against, hiring black people at Texaco. Nobody hires them. We're just like black jelly bean. People pick around them, and we just end up at the bottom of the bag. So like if your politics is driven by an abundance of choice, and you think choice is your God, that's going to be an anti-black politics. You can't be surprised when that politics leads to segregated schools, when that politics leads to segregated housing, when that politics leads to employment discrimination. And then if you don't have housing, schools, or employment, you can't be surprised when choice and abundance of choice politics leads to increased incarceration for black people, because like those people don't have jobs, a place to live, or an education, because we've starved them of those resources through segregation. Because that's what segregation is. Segregation leads to neglect. And that's why, like, if there's a congregation of black people in any community, you should check the water, because it leads to neglect. That's where the lead is going to be, in the water. So that's why integration is good. And we're going to move from integration. There's an odd chance that Tommy Curry, I asked Tommy to call in, and he's kind of a fantastic mind. I'm going to check to see if he called in. Hold on. Before I move to my next. I dropped a lot of knowledge, so like, guys, talk about yourself. Talk amongst yourselves. Let me just send a quick message to Tommy. Feel free to call in. Feel free to call in. Tell me your zip. All right. So, how do we go from integration to entrepreneurship? So, here's the deal. There are a lot of prominent politicians telling you that entrepreneurship is the way out of our situation. All you need to do is be oh, you like my, all right, so I can't find my contacts. So you got my glasses, then I couldn't find my other glasses, so these are the glasses I get. These are my glasses, y'all. Like, I can see, they give me panoramic vision. Like, come on now. I still do fine. So there's a lot of politicians who say that, like, you know what? We need to build black entrepreneurship. We need to build black entrepreneurship. We need to build black entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship is the way to the future. That's misguided for a few distinct reasons. One, we talked about before how real power is in production, not consumption. Real power is in production, not consumption. We cannot consume our way out of our problems. We can only like produce and like get a balance of power with the producers. Now, here's the deal. If you're an entrepreneur, you think you're a producer, but what you really are a consumer of contracts. Right? I'm going to say this again. If you're an entrepreneur, if you're a black entrepreneur in America, you think that you are a producer, but what you really are a consumer of contracts. So even if you somehow get the investment capital to start up your business, if you can't find someone who's willing to offer you a contract, like, you're not really in the game. Right? So a black entrepreneurship politics that doesn't talk about getting black businesses contracts is a way to distract black politics away from what we really need, and that's going to be entrepreneurship with government guaranteed contracts, government set aside contracts. So don't let anybody talk to you about entrepreneurship without talking to you about how they're going to guarantee you contracts and where the contract is coming from. Because that's where your stability is going to come from. I think there are some 26 million, small businesses. And when I say small businesses, I mean businesses under 500 employees. So there are, I think, 26 million of them. Of those, 24 million have 0 employees. So that's not really, and like, I suspect that number, and these are from the government websites. So I suspect that number includes like driving for Uber. You consider yourself a small business. No, you're not a small business. You're driving for Uber. You don't have employees. And here's the deal. The logic of the market is such that businesses grow when they're successful. You're supposed to reinvest capital into production, equipment, and employees. So everyone can't be a small business owner. That's not the logic of the market. It's working against you. So the con that like every black person can own a small business is just that, a con. Like, you have to work, like, a lot of people for business, for the economy to grow, a lot of people have to work for a lot of people. So we shouldn't just be talking about small business. We're talking about how we're going to get 20% of those jobs, especially those jobs like in corporate offices. Like, not all white people, like not all white capital is entrepreneurship capital. A lot of that money is people working for people. They got good jobs working for people, jobs with benefits. They got the jobs we're locked out of. So don't let bad politics lock black people into poverty wages jobs and then tell them the way out of those poverty wage jobs is entrepreneurship. A good black politics says that, like, all right, so some people can be entrepreneurs, but we need to talk about the vast majority of black people who are going to be working for somebody, and we need a better life for black employees. There's no shame in being an employee. There's no shame in being an employee, clocking in and clocking out or working for somebody, if the balance of power is such that you can negotiate the terms of your employment through, like, collective organizing. So there's no shame in being a union plumber, because you know what? They do very well. There's no shame in working on staff for somebody if you're doing very well, like with the wages. If it's either a union job or a management job that's in a place that takes care of its black managers, or a place that hires black managers. So the black economic freedom politics has to come in 3 prongs. One of them can be entrepreneurship, but that has to come with employment. The contracts. One of them can be entrepreneurship, but that has to come with contracts. The second one's going to be making sure that the employees who are black in the segregated workforce, because we still have a segregated workforce. Like I said, Antonio Morris suggested that black people, at least in Los Angeles, are pretty much in 13 occupations. So we still pretty much have a segregated workforce. We have to make sure that those 13 occupations are unionized and organized, because that way they can negotiate the terms of that employment, so that, like, you're working as an employee, but you're making $70,000, $80,000. You're making $100,000. You're making $60,000. So, like, you're good. They say the secret that people don't know about black entrepreneurship, I'll just say the secret that people don't know about black entrepreneurship is the easiest way to be an entrepreneur is to have a spouse who has a job. I'll say this again. The easiest way to be an entrepreneur is to have a spouse who has a job, a sanitation worker, or a teacher, or a nurse. Like, because that way the entrepreneur can, like, take the hits. Actually, the easiest way to be an entrepreneur is have someone who can hook you up with a government contract. Second easiest way to be an entrepreneur is to have a spouse with a job, because that way a good, stable, institutional government job, because that way the entrepreneur can take the hits while the person with the job will always have a job. And this is what they don't tell you about, the best way to be an entrepreneur. And even if, like, your spouse has a job, that's still not going to solve the problem. You're not going to be viable if you don't have access to contracts. The third prong of a 3-pronged politics for black economic freedom is what we're talking about. Black economic freedom is managers, right? We need pipelines that create black hiring managers. We need pipelines who create black hiring managers in stable positions, so that they could, aren't afraid to hire black people, because black people hire black people at a rate that's higher than non-black people hire black people. So we need entrepreneurship that needs to come with contracts. That's government. We need entrepreneurship, and the government piece is going to have that entrepreneurship come with contracts. We need black employees, and the government piece is going to have a space where those employees can organize to negotiate the terms of those employments, because the logic of the market says that, like, the employer has more power than the person seeking a job. The person producing the job has more power than the person consuming the job, because producers have more power, because real power is in production and not consumption. Right? So I'm going to tie it all to that mantra. Remember, real power is in production, not consumption. The person producing the job has more power than the person consuming the job, because the person consuming a job can only choose among the jobs that are available for consumption. They can't produce a job for themselves. So to balance that power, employees can get together, organize, and try to redress and balance the power between employees and employers, and you do that through organizing a union. So that's why unions are good for black people in black jobs. That's why black people who are nurses, black people who are sanitation workers, black people who are teachers are doing moderately well because those jobs historically have been unionized. Right? So think about that. And then thirdly, and the government part of that second part is creating a climate that makes unionizing and organizing with fellow workers possible and encouraged so that you can negotiate the terms of your employment with your employer. Now, there's a guy in Georgia I work with by the name of Richard Dean Winfield, and he's running for Congress. That's the 10th district in Georgia. He's running for Congress on the platform that employees need spaces on the boards, because having a CEO and a board collude for the benefit of the shareholders without bringing in the employees on the board just means that employees are systematically, like, their labor is extracted and disposable. So if you put employees on the board like they have in Germany, then like that balances the power. Elected employee representatives on the board like they have in Germany, then it balances the power of employee-employer relations. But that's one plan. And then third, we need black managers in hiring positions. And that happens with a government pipeline to management, a government enforced pipeline, because these big institutional actors, like Chick-fil-A doesn't want to hire black people in corporate. Like, I say that because that's an Atlanta company. But Aflac's another Atlanta company. CNN. Like, they are not in the business of hiring black hiring managers. So you need government enforced pipeline. We need a government that'll say, like, look, we're going to take away your license, Charter or Comcast, unless you can show me that you pipeline a sufficient number of black people into management positions. And it's not enough to have one token Negro, because that person's going to be scared for their jobs. You need enough so that there's a power base of black people who can say, like, no, we're going to hire some black people at lower levels, and we're going to pay these black people right. So entrepreneurship, government, the government bit is contracts. Employees, the government bit is a politics that allows black employees to organize, and then just working for big institutional companies, because that's fine. And the government bit is forcing these companies to create pipelines for black people to be shunted into management positions, because they have a history of not allowing black people in management positions. And also, government has the authority to withdraw licenses from these private actors if they show that they're not hiring black people in the management levels. So that's a politics for economic freedom that's actually honest about the limits of entrepreneurship. Because the politics of shunting black people into low-wage jobs, crappy jobs, and then telling them that the way out of their crappy job is to be an entrepreneur is an awful politics, because there are, like, numbers-wise, there are a lot of good jobs in America. There are, like, being an employee isn't a bad thing to be if you're a union employee, or you're a manager, or you're an employee with a company that's been forced to treat you well. And here's the deal. This has to happen with politics, because the one law they don't teach you in business school, but which is true, is that one company treating an employee well, or treating an employee too well, might get punished by the market of its competitors. So unless you force all employers in a given industry to treat their employees well, then none of the employers in a given industry will treat their employees well, because they don't want to be at a competitive disadvantage from any of their other competitors. So if you want businesses to behave ethically, you need it to happen at the political level, because they have the authority to enforce these mandates on all the competitors. We can't just expect one business, one firm to do the right thing and put itself at a competitive disadvantage. So, good. I think I've given enough of a political education today. I've talked about power and why you need to be educated into power with an eye towards justice. Because if you're not educated into power, you will find yourself wielding power in all of these awful ways, maybe even unbeknownst to yourself. You'll wield power in all of these awful ways, and the people who you wield it over won't tell you, right? And so, because like they don't have any incentive to tell you, and they're incentivized not to tell you. So, got to wield power. And there's another situation where we take advantage of people who are coerced by the circumstances. I think the whole idea that like if black people want to get ahead, they have to join the military. I think that's like the same as if black people want to get ahead, they have to go and sleep with R. Kelly. I think that's like you're coercing people. You're calling it freedom and a choice. That's really a choice that's born out of coercive circumstances rather than a choice that's a matter of freedom. Don't worry about being patriotic. Join the military so that like you get your way out of generational poverty. That's the United States not giving us a black politics that's adequate to our position, and instead coercing us into military service because that's the only way out. I think that's selling our risk, selling our lives in a way that's cheap. Black lives don't matter if like you're going to coerce me into, throwing it away in Fallujah. So that's where I am. I'm going to put up the number now and see if, it looks like some people do want to call, and some people already have the number. So let me put up the number now. Thank you for letting me be myself. And let me say hi to Facebook real quickly. 230 of you guys. Hi, y'all. Let's do it. Let's take some calls. Oh, let me plug in the phone. All right. Hello, you're on Breaking Ground. What's going on?
Hey, Ryan, how you doing tonight?
Hey, what's up?
Not much. I'm doing a great show right now, and I just wanted to kind of like bring out some points like from the last show that you had. You guys were talking about like the problems, like the specific enemies, if you will, the gatekeepers of our community. Or rather, I think they're groups rather, and I think one of the biggest ones that never gets talked about, especially in the mainstream, that I believe Dr. Curry brought up in some of his past comments were some of the academic class, the bourgeois academic class within universities that try to espouse supposed radical rhetoric. All the while, they're the ones really just using that as a trampoline, if you will, to ascend into a higher platform, and therefore more so to a higher class bracket at the expense of the communities that they supposedly speak for. And it seems like now it's like how it's trickled down. Like we use these. They use these certain social events when it concerns Black lives to their advantage, and they don't really talk about the history, the historical context, if you will, and how that historical context has fueled Black politics. It's always this weird a separation through admittance of it. It's always like even with like any history reference, without the actual core context of how that actually feels like our political movement. And there's so much controlled opposition to a certain degree.
Yeah, man, it's just.
I feel like it's.
Yeah, I'm gonna speak to your point. Thanks for your point. He was talking about the black talking class. Honestly, a lot of professors, people who are gonna do what I do, or black media being controlled opposition, managed opposition, and like honestly, I'll name names because I actually don't think, like I'm not gonna do a politics. I think Michael Eric Dyson is a problem, right? Like I think guys like Dyson. I think a lot of people. I think a lot of black talking heads are picked for their willingness to screw up black politics. I'll say it again. I think a lot of black talking heads are picked for their willingness to screw up black politics. And this happens on the left, the center, and the right. On the right, you get these prosperity pastors who are picked for their willingness to tell you that God, not government's going to solve your problems. But the thing is, I know my Bible, and, both the Old Testament and the New Testament, they talk a lot about justice and seeking justice. And, Peter in Romans, Paul in Romans talks about using your body as an instrument for justice. And there's a lot of talk about justice. And I have a problem with these prosperity pastors who don't talk about justice in the way that I believe that will actually deliver black people the justice for their community they deserve. As I said before, I think we need fewer 501c3 Jesuses and more people talking about that Negro from Nazareth. I think that's the way we should go. So that's on the right. You get these black people who are, I think, picked and definitely funded in order to screw up black politics. In the center, you have folks like Michael Eric Dyson, who will, and like, I guess some charter school advocates like Roland Martin or D. Ray McKesson, who will tell you that, we got to use markets to help black people. That way, like, the smartest black people will get out. It's okay if, like, the best black people go to Ivy League schools, or, like, that we weed through black people to send some through charters and give a lot of people choice. And remember, we're like the poor black people especially are like the black jelly beans. If you give a lot of people choice, they're not going to choose you. And people who are telling you that choice is going to support black life and is the answer to black communities aren't being honest about, like, what black communities need in terms of stability and support. And choice will never get you there. Choice will get you neglect, because everyone's going to choose to neglect you. And that's not going to get us to black politics we need. So that's the center. And then on the left, you got a new group of Negroes picked by so-called left leaders who will say that, like, no, race doesn't matter. We're all working people. We're all poor people. The problem is, and I think this ties into our discussion before, poor people are just impotent racists. Poor white people especially. But poor black people too. They're just impotent racists. The first thing they're going to do when they get money is use that money to increase housing segregation, increase education segregation, and to call the cops to get you away from like their nice stuff. Like, you need that racial education if we're going to expect, like, poor people to do the right thing with the money they get and not just reproduce anti-black racism in America. All right, so there's no way around racial political education and racial and the history, and showing the history and the logic of black politics. Of black poverty, especially generational black poverty. There's just no way around it, because if you give poor people money, the first thing they do is use that poor people to make use that money to make black life worse. Unfortunately, a lot of those people who are poor, get money, but don't have the political education are black people. R. Kelly might be one of them. So, that was that call. I'm going to take another caller. Doo-fa-doo. Hello, caller. You on? Yes. What's up?
Hi, I'm from Cleveland, and I heard that you were playing the Fred Hampton clip again.
Yeah.
And you brought up the issue of theft.
Yes.
And there's something going on in Cleveland and the fourth ward that just like really stuck out to me. Like I studied nutrition and dietetics when I went to school, and I got my degree. And it kills me that I didn't get to use it, but I always watch stuff when it comes to food deserts
Right.
and how it affects our community in particular. So there's in the fourth ward of Cleveland, there's like 80,000 people or so.
Okay.
70 to 80,000 people. It's like 95 or 96% black.
Okay. Yeah.
The median income in that area is like $30,000.
Yeah.
And only about 50% of the people in the year 2000 were homeowners.
Okay.
And since the market crash, I am positive that it's probably only about like 30%. Because most of the people that I know from that area, they rent.
Right.
Now, in that area, there's a large grocer called Giant Eagle. And it's based in Pittsburgh, but it covers like a huge region in the Midwest.
Okay.
And that was the only grocery store that people had. And they decided that they were going to pull out of that area like 10 days before they shut it down.
Okay.
And this happened both on the east side of Cleveland, where mostly black people stay, and on the west side. And the crazy thing was that like those white people, they got mad and they got on their government. They were like, we need a grocery store, because they were in the food desert too. After that place shut down, they're like, we need a grocery store. We need it, and we need it now. This happened in like January or February. I think like a month or two later, they figured out a solution.
Right.
And they went to their council people. They figured out the transportation.
Right.
So that people can get to a grocery store.
Yeah.
They figured out. They worked with the government, and the government, I think they subsidized for somebody a business to come back into that area.
Okay. Good.
And they made it happen. And they had, I'm pretty sure, community gardens started springing up.
Sure.
And then,
Why not?
we're talking about white people.
Yeah.
And they got enough capital and they got home ownership on their side.
Right.
They can grow their own garden in case something happens.
That's true.
The definition of the food desert is not having access within a mile of where you stay of having fresh fruits and vegetables.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
So
thank
if
you.
you don't own your own land, if you can't grow your own stuff, then what are you supposed to do? Now, what I see happening in a lot of urban or minority-based or black communities is that everybody immediately says, get yourself a community garden. If you had a community garden or if you grow your own stuff, then everything will be okay. But that's not the case.
No.
Because, like, in that area, a little bit further down the hill, there is a co-op that's owned by black people. They have a greenhouse, and they do grow fresh fruits and vegetables. And a little bit further down, there is a place that has a vineyard, which is pretty cool. But at the same time, to say that, like, look, you point your finger at these black people who don't make very much, who are probably working jobs that consume like all of your time, all of your energy, and say you need to tend to a garden so that you have access to food.
Right. Good.
So
Good.
that you
All
can
right.
quit being obese. So that you can quit being upset. So you don't have metabolic syndrome anymore. That's
Right.
crazy. And that's wildly unfair. And then to take away their options and say, you got to do it yourself.
Right.
That's not right.
Thank you. I'm going to address this off air.
Yeah.
Thank you for your time. All right. So she was talking about food deserts, and then people, and then especially a lot of white liberals, will wag their fingers at black communities. It's like, well, you guys just need to start your own garden. You need a community garden. No. Sometimes I just need a Kroger that has good food. I need a Kroger. I need not a Kroger, a Safeway, or I need someplace, or Publix, or I don't need. Sometimes, and I'll say this. I didn't used to talk like this, but like some of these communities, they just need a Walmart. They need a Walmart with a big old. They need a unionized. We need to unionize Walmart and put Walmart in there, or they need a Publix that actually hires black people. Don't tell people who work a job to like grow their own food too. Growing your own food in modern America is a luxury. It's a pastime. It's a hobby. Don't tell people like that's not a serious solution. That's not a serious solution. Community gardens is not a serious solution to food deserts. A politics that gets you a unionized grocery store. I say this because I unionized a grocery store about, almost 15 years ago. I've had a ton of jobs. One of them was a grocery store cashier. I unionized that grocery store in my time there. And before we unionized, I didn't make a lot of money. After we unionized, I made, $20 an hour. That's a lot of money. Probably the most money that might be the most money I've ever made in a job. Yeah, I've had a lot of bad jobs. So the answer to a food desert is not a community garden, just like the answer to black poverty is not entrepreneurship. It's just not. The answer to a food desert is sometimes having a Publix or a grocery store with a good produce section in the store, and the answer to black economic life isn't entrepreneurship. It might just be like looking at the sectors that hire black people and making sure that those employees get a bump up to non-poverty wages. All right, we're gonna keep going. Oh yeah, and this is a political play, because she said when there was a food desert in a white community, they got around and they pressured their political leaders, because local politicians have a lot of power if you don't let them tell you that they don't have any power. First of all, the job of a local politician, the first job they're going to say that, oh, that's not my responsibility, I can't do that. You're going to have to ask the state. That's the first thing a local politician is going to say to you. That's the first thing a local politician is going to say to you. And that means you need to remove that local politician. And the same thing with your preacher. If your preacher says, oh, I can't really talk about politics from the pulpit, I can't really use this as an organizing, that's the sign that says you need to remove your pastor. You're going to the wrong church. Either move or organize with other people in the congregation to get that pastor moved, because that's the first thing they're going to do to you, and it's just not true. A real pastor and a real local politician is going to say, we're going to get justice for our people, because a pastor will say that's what it means to love their neighbor. When you love your neighbor in this world, that means you're getting justice for them. And the politician says, I'm going to get justice for my people, because the Civil Rights Act of 1866 says that all people should be in the economic life of the United States. So I'm going to protect my people. I'm going to protect my black people. I'm going to get them the economic life of their people. And if the state has a problem with it, I'm going to wait for the state attorney general to sue me for trying to get justice for my people. I'm going to make sure minority businesses get contracts. I'm going to force businesses, and we're going to withhold licenses from businesses who don't do business with minority businesses, or who don't hire minority, actually I'll just say black, who don't hire black people in management position. And I'm going to withdraw licenses from businesses that only hire black people at poverty wages. If your local politician isn't willing to do that, or tells you that like it's the state's responsibility to make sure that's the case, that they don't have the power, that means get rid of the local politician, because your local politician should be fighting for you. And then if they're not willing to fight for you, and if they fight for you, you should say, thank you, and we're going to let the state bring the attorney general and make you stop. See, this is how white people kept schools segregated for so long. Brown versus Board of Education passed in 1952, but either 52 or 54, I think it's 52. But like a lot of these schools, and especially in the South, didn't segregate until like the late 70s. Didn't desegregate until the late 70s, because they forced, because the local people, the local white people, kept on their local politicians saying, we don't want our school desegregated. And local politicians said, well, I know it's a law to desegregate our schools, but I'm going to do what my local people says. And so they didn't desegregate the schools until like it took like the National Guard, or depending on who you talk to, federal money being taken away from these schools to desegregate, or like many court cases, subsequent court cases. It wasn't just like one court case and it was over. So make your local politicians fight for black people, and say that, and make your local politicians risk the city being sued for fighting for black people. Say, look, local politician, you could fight for my rights under the Civil Rights Act of 1866, which guarantees black inclusion, economic inclusion. So that gives you the cover to fight for minority businesses. That gives you the cover to fight for pipelines to businesses. And that gives you the cover to threaten to withhold contracts from large institutional actors, your universities, your hospitals, your big schools, your private schools, or who don't hire or promote black people. That gives you the authority. If you're not willing to take that authority, if you're not willing to use your local political power on my behalf, then like you need to be gone. And make those real bigots at the state level or at the national level sue the city for fighting on your behalf. Don't let your local politician weasel out and say, like, we don't have the authority to do it. No, you have licensing authority. Use that licensing authority to fight for my civil rights, and make someone stop you using that licensing authority to fight for black civil rights. All right, I'm going to talk to more callers. Caller, what's up?
Army.
Hey, what's up?
Hey, this your girl Tanya from Dallas.
Hey, Tanya. What do you know?
Yeah. Oh, well, I'll tell you what. When you showed that clip of Brother Fred, I had to YouTube that to find that, and I actually watched that whole documentary.
Okay.
Oh, that was deep for someone that
21.
For someone that young. 20. And I'm thinking to myself, comparing that back then to the way our generation X grew up to this generation now, I'm like, what happened? My God, what happened?
Well, what happened? What happened, real quickly, I'll tell you what happened. What happened was the baby boomers told their kids that their problems can be solved with individual choices and individual actions, not community organizing. When the truth is, our problems will only be solved through community organizing. The baby boomers lied. Individual choices will not help the black community.
Because I told my mom, I said, down at the sheets and the fight for your rights going on, and then you got to tell me education's the way. Wait a minute.
Wait a minute.
No. You need to, one thing I told my children, you better pay attention to what's going on in the world.
Yes.
Because they'll send you a bill of goods that ain't going to be worth nothing, and you really need to do research on the people that you follow.
Okay.
See if they got a platform. See if they come with receipts. Otherwise, if they can't bring it with a contract, don't contract.
No?
That's what I say.
they don't bring it with a contract.
I'm going to go ahead and cut that short. But
Thank you.
You go on and have a good show.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. You hear what she says? When if you talk to your local politicians and they talk to you about business, or you talk to any politician, they tell you about entrepreneurship or anything like that, say, if you don't bring it with a contract, then then don't contact. I don't see a contract, then don't contact. Don't talk to me about entrepreneurship unless you're going to talk about black businesses getting contracts. You got it? All right, let's keep going. And also, I'm going to keep playing that Fred Hampton video like probably throughout the rest of my life. And I'm definitely going to play it for my daughters like every other month. Because that's what we want our children to be like. We should thank Fred Hampton, but we should thank Fred Hampton's mama. Like, that's what we want our children to be like. So play that clip for your children. Play that clip for your children. And know that that is the kind of 21-year-old we need in the black community. There is one kid. There's a kid, and people in Chicago will recognize his name, Ashawn Johnson. Ashawn Johnson was 9 years old 3 years ago. And he could be Fred Hampton. And you think Ashawn Johnson, you remember that name, but you also think Ashawn Johnson's mom. Because that's what leadership looks like. All right. Next call. Hi, caller, you're on. What's up?
Hey, what's up, Amy?
Hey.
I wanted to say to you, we also have to look at the fact that we have systemic problems with, you talk about the black neighborhoods, the lead poisoning and brown zones that most of these black neighborhoods are set up in. We're causing systemic problems. I try to tag in a lot of articles that I've been doing research on because over the last 5-6 years after having traveled around the country, I realized a lot of our problems have to do with environmental impacts, the legacy of having black neighborhoods put in areas that have already been contaminated by industry. I'll leave it there.
Thank you. So that's a great book by a guy named Lester Spence. Lester Spence is a professor at Johns Hopkins University. The book is called Knocking the Hustle. Once again, it's Knocking the Hustle by Lester Spence. And in that book, he talks about Freddie Gray and how Freddie Gray was murdered in Baltimore, and like his murder was by cops, and his murder is like the spectacular example of Black Death. But another crime for Freddie Gray that Freddie Gray is a victim of is environmental. Freddie Gray grew up in Baltimore and he was poisoned. He grew up in he was diseased. So the city had been poisoning him. And we know lead is a neurotoxin. We know it has adverse effects. We know that its effects will not go away with time. It'll go away in so many years that it'll go away over a lifetime. So lead, that's what happens when we have neglect. And like I said, segregation leads to neglect, and neglect leads to environmental degradation. So environmental racism is real. Environmental racism is real, and it will not get better until we demand what we need to demand from our elected officials through our politics. Because there isn't lead in everybody's water. There's just lead in our water. Black people and poor people's water. So we need to get that right. And if we have a black politics that will use the authority of government and not let our officials, including our 501c3 pastors, weasel out of organizing for our benefit, then we can get this right. I want to say something about... So here's the deal. A lot of black politicians give you the excuse, well, we can't fight for reparations because it'll never get through the legislature. Obama said, well, it's the right thing to do, but we can't get through the legislature. And then there are other people who say well, this is good for black people and it's fair and it's just, but I don't know if I can get it passed, or I don't know if I can win if I can do it. These politicians don't know their jobs. Their jobs are to do justice by our people. So if you can't get it passed, you need to use the microphone you have as a candidate or an elected official to prepare the electorate to create the kind of electorate that will get it passed the next way. I tell people that Obama wanted to be Jesus and thought he was Jesus, but we really needed John the Baptist. If he couldn't get reparations passed, I needed him to prepare the way so that the next person can. But instead, he told black people not to ask for it. So we need politicians who care more about preparing the electorate for the right policies than they care about getting elected. We need politicians who care about preparing the electorate for the right policy more than what they happen to be able to get through the standing electorate. We need executive officers who, when they run for executive officers and they can't get anything through the legislature, say, look, my job might not be to win. I'm running for governor. I'm running for mayor. My job might be to prepare you to get the right kind of legislature so that the next person who runs for executive office can get justice through. Your job is to prepare the way if the electorate is not ready. Your job is always political education. Politics is pedagogy. Politics is political education. And in this land, politics is political education on the justice claims of black people. Right? So if the electorate's not ready, if the legislature is not ready, then your first job is political education. And if that takes 10 years, that's fine, because then in 10 years, we'll have the electorate that will get the policies we need done. So I hope that's clear. Let's keep going. Take one more caller. Hello, caller, you on?
Hello, my name is Vita from Chicago, and I would like to talk about R. Kelly and how I want to transition into local politics as well.
Yeah.
So, growing up, I went to a school called Kenwood Academy.
Oh, he's a predator.
And when I went there, I remember.
He's a predator. Yeah. Talk about it.
Yeah, so when I went to Kenwood Academy, the people who graduated years ago who would come back to the school, they would tell us stories how R. Kelly would drive through the school looking for girls. And we also had a music teacher. His name was Mr. Lennon, and he had music industry connections because back in 2003, before Kanye became famous, he performed at the school. So in my senior year, that same music teacher got arrested. His name was Mr. Lennon for doing inappropriate behaviors with 3 students. So we had a principal. Her name was Elizabeth Kirby, and she shut it down. We wasn't allowed to talk about what had happened in the schools. And she also made us apply to 3 universities. After I graduated, Elizabeth Kirby, she got promoted to work for the Board of Education. And now I think it's, I feel like when I was at school, my school was like the breaking ground for the new high school requirements, because since she got promoted, now the study is citywide.
Yeah.
And all the schools have to do those requirements, but she made our high school do it first.
Right.
And she would be an example of a local gatekeeper.
Yeah. No. Thank you.
I just want to say that
Thank you for your time.
We need to watch out for the local gatekeepers.
Right. So thank you for your time. So I also used to live in Hyde Park, about 4 blocks away from Kenwood Academy. And the stories were notorious that R. Kelly, with cahoots with this music teacher, used to drive by, and he was a predator. He was a known predator, and they let him in, and he would pick up his high school girls. This is the problem with having a thirsty community. This is the problem with having a community where everyone's desperate. I mean, the music teacher was probably broke himself, or definitely because he was black, related to poverty, which means the music teacher was looking for a come up. Who knows how stable the principal was, who let the music teacher, who shut it down. When everyone is desperate and thirsty in the community, then you're just vulnerable for predators like R. Kelly was. And that's just the place we are as black people. We need to be honest about the desperation of being a generationally poor caste society. What does that mean, and what politics do we need to get out of it? It took an industry. It was a whole system that was so thirsty for recognition, the principal for recognition of not being in a troubled school, and the music teacher from recognition from the music industry, and R. Kelly, who's just using what power he had in cahoots with this, and the vulnerable girls, because they weren't even women, they were girls at the school, were looking for their self-esteem in places that they were told they were supposed to be able to get it, which is this movie star. That's a story that only happens when your community is in collapse. That's a story that only happens when your community is in collapse, when everybody is desperate and everybody is vulnerable. All right. So I think I'm going to cut it off now. Thank you for your time, YouTube. And remember, we're going to try to do this. We're going to try to do this at a studio audience, but with a studio audience in a studio, at least on Wednesdays, starting in a few months. It'll be faster if you go to thefunkyacademic.com and kick down a little bit of money So we can buy some equipment so I can set up a second studio in that space, and we can actually get like Black Athens, Georgia in the space with a vet taking calls, and we take some from the crowd also. And that's what's next. And I thank you for your time and consideration. And remember, if you take anything from this video, take the Fred Hampton clip and think about what it would take for you to raise you and yours and recreate 21-year-olds and 20-year-olds and 24-year-olds or 40-year-olds, almost 40-year-olds in that mold, and who could speak like that about the need for black politics that keeps its eye on justice and education, because if you're not educated for justice, you'll just end up stealing. All right. Peace.